Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The session is about to begin. Saygıdeğer konuklarımız, oturum kısa bir süre sonra başlayacaktır. Lütfen salondaki yerlerinizi almanızı rica ederiz. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Founding Director and Chairman of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center, Richard Morningstar. Saygıdeğer konuklarımız, Atlantik Konseyi Global Enerji Merkezi Başkanı ve Kurucu Direktörü Sayın Richard Morningstar'a sözü bırakıyoruz.
Well, now, with the having heard from the voice of God, I guess we can begin. First of all, I would like to welcome and thank you all for joining us so bright and early for the second day of the Istanbul Summit. We have a great panel on regional sustainable energy expansion and supported by our partner, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and I want to thank Phil Bennett for that. The EBRD is a key player in financing energy development and has significantly scaled up its green financing efforts in recent years. As you all know, Turkey and the Middle East are experiencing very rapid growth in energy demand, particularly for natural gas, but renewables are also increasingly seen as viable and valuable as an addition to domestic energy portfolios. And I think Fatih pointed this out yesterday, Fatih Birol, that globally renewable capacity additions overtook coal for the first time in 2016, indicating that the expansion of sustainable energy is clearly underway. This has been aided by the efforts of international financial institutions, governments, businesses to drive growth in renewables in the region and to provide green finance and investment. To examine the potential for and progress in regional sustainable energy expansion and related challenges and opportunities, I'll introduce our terrific group of panelists. First, it's my great pleasure to introduce again Fatih Birol, who you all know as the director of the International Energy Agency. And as director, he's pushed the IEA to play a broader role in renewables, energy transformation, and energy efficiency. And we look forward to hearing him discuss this. As I mentioned at yesterday's panel, Fatih this is his fourth appearance at this summit. 2 speeches yesterday, a panel yesterday, and again a panel today. So yesterday I said he was certainly going to be named the most valuable player of the Istanbul Summit. So thank you again for participating. We have Philip Bennett, who's the first vice president and head of client services group at the EBRD, and he'll be talking about the various mechanisms that EBRD has and what they're doing to foster sustainable energy cooperation. We have also, fortunately with us, Ambassador Murat Yavuz Ateş, who is the Deputy Undersecretary at the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Ambassador Ateş most recently served as Ambassador in Myanmar, and we're honored to welcome you, Ambassador, today, who will talk a little more specifically about Turkey's role. From the business end, we have Mark Jones, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Emerging Wind Technologies, which is a wind company that's active across much of the globe, I guess, North and South America, Europe, and Asia. And Mr. Jones has overseen the growth of commercial offerings and expansion into all of those areas, including the writing of purchase power agreements, which is a critical part of the whole financing effort. I know there are a lot of tired people here at the summit Mark apparently arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning. He claims that he'll be coherent. We'll see. And then finally, we have Dr. Varun Sivaram, who's the Douglas Dillon Fellow and Acting Director of the Council on Foreign Relations Program on Energy Security and Climate Change. I'm probably the only person in the room who actually can remember personally when Douglas Dillon was Secretary of the Treasury. In any event, Dr. Sivaram was previously the strategic advisor to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's office on reforming the energy vision and has worked as a consultant at McKinsey, which, well, you all know they consult with all sorts of companies. So before turning it over to Fatih, I have, if I can find the card, some required announcements. One of my instructions was to thank EBRD. I've already done that. Okay, I need to tell you the session is on the record. No surprise. Remember to silence your phones. I remembered to silence mine just before getting on. And you can engage on Twitter by using the hashtag AC Summit. And so with that, let me turn it over to our good friend Fatih Birol to give his views from an IEA standpoint.
Thank you very much, Dick, and good morning to everybody. So when we look at the region, perhaps there are many things to talk, but I want to mention three topics: natural gas, renewables, and energy efficiency. In terms of natural gas, as we discussed yesterday, we see great volumes of gas coming to markets in the next few years. This is important for the regions such as Middle East to make more use of gas and lessen the use of oil in the electricity generation. Today in Middle East, as many of us know, we use a lot of oil to produce electricity. This is from an economic point of view, this is criminal because you use oil to generate electricity. It doesn't make any economic sense. And gas can replace oil and can diversify the Middle East. Coming back to Turkey, in Turkey, I think there is a strong potential to make use of LNG coming to the markets, first of all. And there are some good steps made in the right direction to have the floating LNG terminals. And on top of that, Turkey pushing the TANAP project is an extremely important project for Turkey, but at the same time for the producers and the consumers in Europe. And this would also give, in my view, support to the countries in the western side of Turkey, the neighbors in the Balkans and beyond. This is number one. Number two, renewables. When you look at the global energy picture, the region is one of the laggards in terms of renewable penetration in the electricity generation and beyond, even though there is a huge potential both in wind and in many cases solar. This is why it is this region is following the other countries in the world. I don't mean Europe, Western Europe, but I mean the China, India, Latin American countries. Why this region is behind? I think because of the not having enough support, especially for the financing schemes up to now. Number three, efficiency. Efficiency, we call in the IEA, efficiency is the first fuel. Before oil, before gas, before coal, before renewables, efficiency is the first fuel. And when we look at the efficiency levels of the countries here, energy efficiency of industry, households, global economy, again, this region does not perform well. Poor performance. And here, again, there are two important reasons for that. Number one, the regulations, standards, the minimum efficiency standards in this region is definitely not there as strongly as they need to be. Second, pricing schemes are not helping the efficiency. In some cases, we see strong subsidies for energy, which is definitely not a good driver to use energy more efficiently. If something is much cheaper than their normal value, human beings tend to use it in a wasteful manner, whatever it is. And the cheaper energy as a result of government subsidies, it is not a good news. So like in the renewables, Dick, I believe it is important to find the right financing schemes for the energy efficiency investments. It is moving strongly across the world, but still not strong enough in this region. To sum up, I see three issues here: how to make use of natural gas. Second, how to push the renewables, especially solar and wind power, in addition to other, of course, renewables. And third, there is a huge room for improvement to use the energy more efficiently.
Thank you very much, Fatih. I'm going to come back after the first round of questions and maybe ask you later about the role that IEA is playing in this area and how you're cooperating with other international agencies who are involved in renewables like IRENA or possibly others. But first, let me go to Phil Bennett from EBRD to talk about financing, which is so critical, obviously, to these developments. Can everybody hear okay out there? I know that sometimes there's a problem. I guess so. Okay, good. Oh, louder from the back. You're saying from the back? Okay. Okay. I guess what we have to do too is speak into the microphones, which is made a little difficult because they're on the side here. But in any event, Phil.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. Let me just say that in my short time at the EBRD, and I've been there a little bit longer than 4 years, I've been particularly proud to be associated with what we are doing on the sustainable energy side broadly across our 36-country region. We made a commitment at Paris COP21 to take our financing percentage for green economy to 40%, and we are roughly around 34%. We're already higher than any other IFIs, and we expect to be higher again under the 40% commitment. And when I look at what Turkey represents to us, Turkey is a champion, a poster child for what we have been able to do. And we've only been active in Turkey for 7 years now, since 2009. But in that period, we have financed 9 billion euro of investments in Turkey, and fully 4.5 billion, 50% of that, has been in sustainable energy. So renewables and energy efficiency, as Fatih is saying, energy efficiency could be and should be considered another kind of renewable energy fuel. But we are very, very proud of the way we deliver here, because as you know, we are a private sector driven development institution. And so when we look at what we can do here and the financing channels that we can use, we want to use entities that exist in the private sector to the extent possible, and we want to mobilize private sector capital to the extent possible. So we have really a comprehensive three-stage or three-prong approach to how we approach sustainable energy in all of our countries, but particularly here. First and foremost, we do a fair amount of direct financing of renewables. We've had 5 significant flagship projects in Turkey already, representing 600 megawatts and about 1.5 billion euro of financing. And that represents two of the biggest geothermal and 2 of the biggest wind, including the first largest significant wind way back in 2009. So we're very pleased with what we've been able to do on the direct. But the reality is, Turkey is a developed country in many aspects, and particularly on the financial institution side. And what we try to do is leverage the banking system to the extent possible to deliver capital. The banking sector is an ideal catalyst for investment. They know what's going on. They're an aggregator. They're a proponent. They're a supporter. They're out there in the field all day long. What we want to do is leverage our capacity through them. So we have already invested €3 billion through banks, through what we consider to be sustainable energy financing facilities. And there are various different kinds for SMEs, for mid-caps, for energy efficiency type programs. And we have done this through 7 of the more substantial financial institutions in Turkey. So that is a way of delivering through the private sector to get what we consider to be leverage and more impact. Now, we also have a couple of other ways within the within this overall framework. For example, last year or 2015, we were very proud to make our first direct equity investment in a renewable energy pure play aggregator, and that was Akfen Energy. Both IFC and EBRD, each of us bought 17% for $100 million. And in that company, there was already 210 megawatts of operational capacity, but then there was a pipeline at that point of 300 megawatts, and beyond that, we've already added another 200 megawatts. So a very substantial way of leveraging a private sector player to have an impact in wind, solar, and hydro. So now, financing is one thing, but policy is the other. We are very involved with the Ministry of Energy from the point of view of the Renewable Energy Action Plan that already exists, the upcoming Energy Efficiency Action Plan that is imminent and very cross-cutting. And as part of that, we deliver technical cooperation to the ministry. We help with the new FIT, feed-in tariff scheme coming up, the renewable licensing scheme, etc. But also, we create other aspects. Within this, and this is one I'm kind of proud of, and the gentleman that worked on it is here, is something called Pluto, which is a private sector early stage geothermal project development facility. 100 million with us, 25 million with a clean technology fund, and that creates the ability to generate bankable projects. We are not short of financing, we're short of bankable projects. And this is a way to get geothermal ramped up. And as part of this, we've already now done 35% of geothermal. So direct, intermediate credit lines, and policy allow us to deliver a 3-pronged approach that generates the future of what we call, the future potential of sustainable energy.
Thank you. I will ask a very brief follow-up. Do you have enough experience yet to determine whether payback on your loans and payback on your green financing loans are at similar rates as payback on more traditional project finance?
I don't have that data, I'm afraid, so you're asking one level below my pay grade, so I don't have that information.
Okay. All right, let me turn to Ambassador Atesh to give his comments on what's happening in Turkey.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody. This is very early in the morning. Thank you for being here. When we look at Turkey, actually, we have a different situation than many other countries. As Philip mentioned, in many respects, Turkey is a developed country. We have the systems that are developed, the mechanisms are there. But from another perspective, Turkey is different in the sense that it's an emerging economy. Turkish growth rates are very high, and the increase for demand for energy is very high. In the last 10 years, for example, Turkey had the highest rate of energy increase among the OECD countries. So when we look at it that way, from the demand side, Turkey needs a lot of energy. Now, when we look at the supply side, there is good news and bad news. The bad news is actually from the perspective of primary energy sources. Unfortunately, Turkey is a very poor country. We have to import almost all of our fossil fuels natural gas and oil and partially coal as well. But the good news is that we have awareness of the situation, and we give top priority to energy matters. And for this reason, in our foreign ministry, for example, we have a very strong energy department. Now, another good news, of course, is the fact that we are in the proximity of countries which have natural resources in terms of energy. And of course, when we talk about sustainable energy, we are mostly talking about renewable sources, but of course also natural gas is among the most clean fossil fuels. So natural gas is also a very important component of the overall Turkish energy picture. Now, what are we doing to deal with the unbalance between the demand and supply situation in Turkey? First, we are taking steps, and we have been taking steps with market regulation, more transparent, more competitive systems, as Fatih was also mentioning. We are trying to increase the share of domestic energy resources. So our exploration for natural gas, offshore, onshore, in our territories actually will be increased. This will also include Black Sea and the Mediterranean. And of course, as was previously said, energy efficiency is quite important. We are trying to increase both in terms of energy production, energy end use, as well as transmission. And diversification of our sources is important, and renewables come into this. And among the renewables, also hydro is an important element of our energy overall structure. And of course, we should also add to this nuclear. I'm not so sure if nuclear is considered as part of the sustainable energy scheme, but from a climate change perspective, I think it's very important. And of course, we are trying to diversify source countries in terms of natural gas, as well as the routes. All this, of course, requires a lot of international cooperation. It requires international cooperation from the perspective of finances, Philip was mentioning, from the technical perspective, also from the project perspective, because each project is unique. And for us, for any project to be feasible, it has to be, first of all, economically making sense, and it should have a win-win situation for all the parties involved. And from a political perspective, it should bring stability and peace, not only for the countries involved, but for the overall region. And for our region, I think this is quite important. For some projects to realize, we need the feasibility of all these three conditions. And of course, the political situation should also be good enough for these projects to be realized. For example, as I mentioned, we will be having more explorations in the Mediterranean. And there, for example, we see the Greek Cypriot regime having some contracts with some international oil companies, which actually is not helping the ongoing negotiations in Cyprus, because the sources not only belong to the Greek Cypriots, but also belong to the Turkish Cypriots, so they have equal rights in them. And also other problems, for example, the areas that are being given for exploration have not really been agreed upon yet. For example, Block 6, which was recently given, is also seen by Turkey as part of its continental shelf. And of course, Turkey will not allow other countries to explore on its continental shelf. So I don't want to go too much into the politics, but what I'm trying to say is, for us, energy is a source of cooperation, but of course, for cooperation to take place, there are certain conditions that need to be realized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Let me turn it over to Mark Jones. You've been in the weeds doing projects, and some in Turkey, but in all parts of the world. What's been your experience? What do you see as the positives? What are the obstacles you're facing? How do you find dealing with the financing issues that are necessary to your projects?
Okay. Well, I mean, first for context, I guess if you look at what we're doing today.
Your microphone, get closer.
And can everybody hear me? So I guess if you look at us from a very practical sense, you look at us, what we're doing right now. So we have people in Chile moving projects forward there, in Mexico. We're the biggest community developer in New York State. We're in California. We're in many countries in Europe, and we go right the way across to India and the Philippines. So I think we do have some context, and from a very personal point of view, my first association with Turkey was in the early stages of the Doha Power Project, which of course now is about to move over to effectively new hands. And that's been up and running and been a great success story for many years. I remember there was nothing there when that project was put up. Now there's quite a lot around it. But if I look very practically at the situation here, now as it affects us, whatever programs you put in place, they have to be significant. They have to be economic. And the local infrastructure, and that means political infrastructure, it means financial infrastructure, they've got to support it. I think Turkey has had a very enlightened policy, actually. Most people will know that there have been some large wind farms that have been put up. People will know that solar is moving forward. What people may know less is that Turkey has been a leading light in hitting two key rules that I outlined. One is, you have to be economic. There is no point setting up programs which facilitate expensive generation coming online. And what Turkey has done is put a program in place enabling local generation to be put in place to meet local needs below the cost of energy that those parties already pay for their energy. They've done that, and that is really now facilitating a growth. So to put it in context, we've put our first project up in Turkey. We've delivered our second project. We now have around 60 different projects that we're moving forward here. In most of those cases, there are either municipalities or small-scale businesses or medium-scale businesses like large-scale textile companies, or our first facility is a rice processing plant. And what we're doing is putting our turbines right up on the doorstep. They basically offset their cost of power. Now, this is a need that goes right the way across Turkey. And from my point of view, it's not a competition between wind, solar, coal, gas. It's about building a system which works. So what we're finding here is that the plus points are the ones that I've outlined. The challenges are, and it's interesting what you said on the EBRD perspective about there being more money than projects. We have the reverse issue. We have more projects than our customers can find money for. Because many of these people they're mid-scale industry. They're often private scale industry. But they have a chance to significantly reduce their energy costs and the system benefits by reducing loads. The problem is that the banking system, while supporting this rollout, is struggling to find I guess what the Americans will call a cookie cutter system to make this keep working. And so we're working with some of the banks to build programs which will allow them to just keep lending and keep lending and keep lending into this. But it's a challenge, because part of the other issue is that where you put localized generation and where you put large-scale generation, you need permission to do it. It's just a practical need. And that requires sign-offs and it requires a process. I think Turkey has tried very hard to make sure that that process is clear and well and understood. But nevertheless, it takes a long time to get through, whether you're solar or whether you're wind. And sometimes the banks run out of patience. Sometimes the local politicians run out of patience. Sometimes the financial backers run out of patience. And so you need stability. You need stability. And that has sometimes been a challenge here. And one glaring example of that right now is projects work because you're recognizing that local generation cuts costs. It cuts transmission costs. It cuts infrastructure costs. But then if what happens is you have a policy response which raises significantly the local transmission costs, then you create another roadblock which slows things down. And that's one of the challenges that Turkey has now. We have 60 projects. If I put that in context, we could easily have 100, 200, 300. There are plenty of customers out there who require cheaper power on a localized basis to fit in harmony with the more centralized generation. But if there's a challenge in recognizing where the finance will come from to back it, if there's a challenge in recognizing where the transmission costs will be for the next 10, 15 years, will they be here or will they be here, then you have a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty slows things down. So I think the systems are in place here. Very practically, there's an incredible level of customer need. It meets the economic need. It definitely reduces the cost of power. And whether it's wind or whether it's solar, Turkey is blessed with having a very significant resource on both. And it can be done very economically. So, you know, we're really looking forward to the continual evolution of policy here to make sure that the costs stay low, that the generation can be put in place because it's meeting a very real need. So that's our practical experience right now in Turkey.
Thank you. That's all very helpful to hear. And maybe, Varun, you've written the book on solar and have done a lot of research. You've heard a lot already this morning. What's your take?
Thanks, Ambassador. Let me thank the Atlantic Council for the invitation. Let me give you a little bit of a sneak preview from what's coming out in my book. It's called Supercharging Solar Power and how it relates to this panel. In my book, I argued that around the world, countries all have noticed that solar is falling in cost very quickly and think that it can solve their own pet problems. In China, that's employment and exports. In Chile, that's the droughts. In India, it's energy access. In California, it's fighting climate change. And in Texas, it's fighting the government, seriously. In Turkey, it seems to me from listening to the ambassador here that solar power, among other sources, can help with three things. It can help improve energy security through diversification. It can help lower energy prices. And it can also, the third thing that you didn't say but that I can intuit is that Turkey seems to talk a lot about becoming a regional energy trading hub. And it could become one in solar as well if it were to really develop the resource potential that Fatih discussed. Unfortunately, it seems to me that there's a parallel with something that Majid Jafar said yesterday. And that was that the Middle East, despite having the most reserves of oil and gas, seems to underperform in terms of how much it actually outputs. The same could be said for solar, as Fatih mentioned, or other renewables. That the Middle East, to which Turkey is more similar than to Europe in renewable potential, the Middle East seems to underperform on its renewables exploitation. Recently, that may be changing, and yet, I noticed that Turkey's solar target is 5 gigawatts. It has a technical potential of 50 or more. So what do we do about it? We heard a lot of views from this panel on how financing can help increase the deployment of solar power, and I totally agree with that. But in addition, when you look down the road and you really want solar to solve some of these gigantic challenges, you'll need a whole lot more solar than what we're talking about today. It really drops in the bucket. And that whole lot more is going to require a flexible energy system. And it's more than just financing to help get solar deployed. Flexibility for the energy system requires two things. The first is integration. Integration that I'm talking about includes integration of grids. So we're, for example, talking about physical integration of Turkey with the European grid. It also includes integration of markets. When you have power markets that integrate, for example, Turkey and Europe, you have a larger area over which to balance your dispatch of power. Now, the physical and market integration allows you to average the intermittency of solar. Solar is a terrible power source. It goes up and down. It's as unpredictable as the weather. You guys know this. But if you have a really big grid, you start to average solar production and demand volatility. That allows you to smooth your supply and demand and better match it. The second thing that flexibility, the second thing we need to increase deployment of solar is flexible systems. And that can be done through storage, but storage is no silver bullet. In the United States, if we wanted to power ourselves with 100% renewable energy, we'd need 38 billion Tesla Powerwalls. Ain't gonna happen. So in addition to storage, you also want things like a diverse generation mix. This can include natural gas, load-following nuclear power. You also want demand response, and yet again, you want markets. You want markets that reward flexibility. They reward First Solar plant in California for providing ancillary services. So this is what you want, and to finally give a sneak preview to what my book concludes, it's in addition to flexibility, we need innovation. Today's solar panel, it's the same panel and every country wants it to do something remarkably different. I argue that that's not good enough, that we need to be more ambitious with what our solar panel looks like. It may not even look like a panel. I used to work as a scientist on newspaper-like solar coatings. You could spool them out of an industrial-sized inkjet printer. If we had technologies like that, or technologies to produce hydrogen fuel from solar energy, then we'd be able to decarbonize not only the power sector, but the transportation sector as well. I want to caution you, there is good progress in renewables around the world, but solar accounts for 2% of global energy today. We can do a whole lot better, but we have to prepare for that future by investing in the technologies of tomorrow, not getting stuck with the technologies of today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for identifying issues that go beyond financing, which obviously is an issue, but issues relating to the regulatory system, new technologies, and so forth are something that we obviously have to consider. I have two questions I think that I'll ask, and then open it up to the audience. One thing that I don't think has come up during the discussion is the whole question of subsidies. For example, in the United States, when legislation was passed to to lift the oil export ban and streamline to a little more extent anyway, LNG licensing, coupled with that was the continuation of subsidies for renewables. I've heard some people say that that's just not necessary at this point, given how costs have come down and it's just distorting the market. Others saying that it's still very necessary. Asking whoever wants to answer the question, how do you see the role of subsidies, and how long, if you think that they're necessary, how long do you think that will be the case?
Well, I'm quite happy from a very practical point of view to answer that question, at least from my perspective. If the power is being provided to the customer at below the price at which they pay today by the generation source that provides it, where's the subsidy?
Talk a little louder. Can you talk just a little louder?
Yeah, sure. So if the power is being provided to the customer from the generation facility put in place at below the cost they pay today, then where's the subsidy? There is no subsidy. And some countries go down the road of basically trying to kickstart something. But the fact is that most generation of any decent size today can provide power at below the cost at which the customer pays for that power. The most important point is to disintermediate as much of the distribution system as possible, whenever possible, in order to basically put that low-cost power directly to the community or to the industrial customer or to others as possible. And that removes the need for subsidy.
Why don't you go? I am the host here. Go ahead.
Thank you. to be fair, there are sometimes hidden costs that may not be reflected in the cost of generation. I'm generally on Mark's side here, but the grid does offer you things like black start capability, ancillary services, power quality and reliability, and you got to price all those in. You rely on the grid when your renewables aren't generating. But if you price all that in some cases, Mark's still right, that renewable energy, for example, from solar and wind, does not actually need to be subsidized, but you got to do the accounting right. I personally think that the most important things to invest in are the system that offers you flexibility rather than the source itself.
No, I would say, first of all, this is true, that the cost of renewables went down substantially. It is very impressive. The solar, in 5 years, 80%. Wind, onshore wind, 1/3. Big drops, and they are much better in terms of their economic viability compared to 5 years ago. But to say that the renewables don't enjoy government support, financial support, this or that way is not true. They are enjoying government supports in different parts of the world, but in many cases they are enjoying less and less support. And I would say that we shouldn't be misled. Only look at examples in few countries in terms of the prices. Overall, renewables need, and in my view, in many cases should receive government support, but it will be less and less. I would say that the onshore wind will be very soon, in many countries, in many cases, will not need any government support. But in terms of solar and offshore wind, I would expect a few more years there is a need for government support. And from a renewables community, I would say, to say that renewables don't need any more government support is not the best strategy.
You had a comment, Phil?
One small point from the EBRD side. We have, there's an issue that gives us pause, and there is no specific direct answer yet. But I will tell you that whenever we consider what goes on in Turkey in the renewables at our board of directors, there is always a conversation about the local content requirement, which is a premium in the feed-in tariff structure. And there is a view that we should be doing everything we can to minimize and eliminate the local content requirement, which we view as a subsidy that is inappropriate across our region and across the globe. So that's an issue for us. It is something that we work on, but we recognize the reality and we move forward from there.
Well, and that's an area where, you know, political and commercial issues meet, because at the end of the day, local content is very much of a political question as to, you know, what may be necessary in any given geographical place. Yes, Ambassador.
Yes, and also, as Fatih said, the cost of renewables are going down because of technological innovation. And we can see this in Turkey. We recently had one project which went for bidding, which is 1 gigabyte solar. And I think the cost was around 6 cents, which is rather a very good price. Thank you.
Let me ask, I have one more question before turning it over to the floor. Our sessions are only an hour, so we're beginning to run out of time. But I do want to ask Fatih, you know, yesterday we launched our energy governance report that the Atlantic Council did, and that was the lunch presentation. And so I would ask you a little more about what the role of IEA is in promoting clean resources, and how you work together or not with other international organizations like IRENA, for example, and maybe others.
Thank you very much, Dick. What we are doing is we work with all the countries in the region. And to be honest with you, we are not making advocacy for any fuel. We have the same arm length to all the fuels. But there is one fuel, I will under one fuel, we are very keen to push, which is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is a topic, and we go all the meetings like this, all of us across the world. There are differences of views in the renewables or nuclear, gas, oil, coal, but when it comes to energy efficiency, it is the only topic that everybody agrees. It's an important thing, let's go ahead. But when it comes to the how we do it, there are rather less ideas. What we are doing is, we go to the bottom line of this. We are, for example, refrigerators. Energy efficient refrigerators or air conditioners is extremely important. We are looking at country, let's say UK example. How UK dealt with energy efficiency standards in refrigerators. We pick up the guy who made the legislation. We pick up the guy who was in charge of the monitoring. We pick up the manufacturers who apply them, bring them all together, and the financial, and all of them go with us to the region. We have training discussions. We have policy advice to governments. We are going to the bottom line of it. We are discussing with the policymakers and try to, together with the governments, put on the table legislation for specific energy efficiency measures. This is number one. Number two, in terms of renewables, we are not an advocacy group. We are more on the policy guidance, policy advice side. We talk with the governments what kind of renewable financing schemes work and which do not work, what are the implications of that, and discuss this with the different governments and institutions, and as you mentioned, Dick, with the international organizations such as IRENA, with the IEF and others. So we at the IEA, we are the, as I said, only organization which looks all the fuels, because if you can't look at the renewables alone. If the share of renewables goes up X%, somebody's share needs to come down. There is a competitive advantage. You have to give a holistic approach, and this is the way we try to function. To sharing the experiences, providing advice with the governments, with the industry, and with the different policymakers.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes. Why don't we take a couple of questions from the floor in succession, and then the panel can respond to them. I see a hand over here. If we need a microphone. And if you could please just stand up and give us your name when you get the microphone.
Thank you very much for an excellent session and all the presenters. My name is Carmine DeFilio with the Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate. While subsidies and policies to support renewables are, of course, virtuous and necessary, how should these policies account for the system costs of renewables, especially in deregulated markets that have a grid operator determining short-term marginal costs? How can you account for the effect that the subsidies supporting renewable energy won't adversely affect the baseload generators? And how do you account for that? And what kinds of solutions would you have so that renewable generation can accelerate to very high levels without hurting the traditional power industry and discouraging investment in it?
Let's hold the answer to that question for a moment. And is there another? Do we have another question? Nobody? Shy group. Oh, somebody. We have somebody. Okay. Phil Cornell back there. And then I'll turn it back to the panel after your question.
Thanks very much. I'm Philip Cornell at the Atlantic Council. I would just ask for the entire panel, pardon me, what do you think are the primary impediments to off-grid renewables, particularly in developing country markets? And are there any sort of policy silver bullets or primary policy impediments that are solvable on a widespread basis?
Okay, whoever wants to answer either of those questions and whatever closing comments you might have. Yes,
Thanks, Ambassador. That's a great question. To rephrase the question, if you have a lot of renewables that are subsidized, you can push other baseload sources that we need in a low-carbon world, like nuclear power, out of the market. It's happening in the United States, it's happening in Germany for other reasons as well. How do you solve this? There are 3 ways that are generally being used, but I don't think they're sufficient. One way is that you can obligate your transmission and distribution utilities to purchase a certain amount of fixed power over the next 5 to 10 years, thereby locking in reserves. A second way is through capacity markets. You guys know all about that. And the third way is through an energy-only market with a very high offer cap. In Texas, that's $9,000 per megawatt hour. That's politically infeasible for many reasons. I think we need innovation in market design to make sure that we can actually have both baseload sources and renewable sources coexist, and that subsidies for one don't push out the other. Very quickly on Philip's question, what's a policy silver bullet? Get out of the way of off-grid solar. For example, kerosene subsidies in India make the price of solar uncompetitive artificially with that of kerosene. Were those subsidies not to exist, or were trade barriers not to exist in Western Africa, you would see supply chains pop up and renewable energy that is cost competitive today without any distortionary subsidies.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I have a couple of points. I think your question is an interesting one. I've been involved in large-scale transmission, one of the US's biggest coal-fired plants, as I say, oil-fired plants here in Turkey. But I think, unfortunately, there's a more rounded situation. The situation is never easy, and I like some of the answers that you've come up with, but if you put large-scale generation on the system, the first thing that happens is you need redundancy protection for that. So in the UK, when they look at putting new nuclear on, there's a lot of what-if scenarios that require an enormous amount of transmission and backup to be put in place in order to protect that. So whatever systems you put in place, they do require backup, and they also require recognition of the new types of technology which are coming in line, whether it's energy efficiency, whether it's demand response, whether it's storage and others, and price signals, to make sure that you do maintain a balanced system. But the fact is it's not just putting a renewables piece on that causes an issue. You put on a large piece of generation, it causes an equal and opposite issue. In terms of islanded power, I think we're well placed to answer that question. We have large facilities up and running in some of the most isolated places in Alaska, for example. We're looking at projects in the Caribbean, in Indonesia and India, and they're all islanded systems. Some of them are very practical issues, which is sometimes extremely expensive to get things there. Sometimes the issue is simply the policy that exists in that place. So for example, if you go to the Caribbean, there isn't a one-size-fits-all because everybody has a different idea how to run their power market, and that means that the solutions become quite challenging. But the other part is that you have to recognize that there are a lot of local inhibitors. So if you go to Indonesia, actually a lot of the local communities that would, for example, benefit from much cheaper power from whether it's solar or wind have an equal problem, but many of the community actually benefits from the importation of the local gasoline that keeps the diesel system running. And so you've got to recognize a lot of those local sensitivities if you're going to make things work in places where actually there's a large need, not a single island need. Those would be my points.
Thank you. As a last comment, there are many important points to underline. But one thing I wanted to leave us with, when you look at the region, some countries have a lot of oil and gas potential. As Ambassador Ateş mentioned, Turkey is a poor country in terms of hydrocarbon, but a lot of renewable resources. Some countries have coal resources, some others other resources. But all the countries have one big resource, which is energy efficiency. There's a huge potential to make use of it in the region. Big room for improvement. And there are so much low-hanging fruits in the region with just simple setting policies, measures, standards, legislations from, as I said, from the electrical appliances to industry motors, from industry motors to cars, trucks, and others. So therefore, I see this a major opportunity for the region to have a sustainable energy future, to push the energy efficiency more strongly, both in terms of government policies and financing.
Yeah, low-hanging fruit. We keep talking about it, and countries just need to take advantage of that. Phil?
When we talk about energy efficiency, though, a lot of what needs to happen happens at the private sector, at the company, on the ground. And one of the things we're proud of at EBRD is that our energy efficiency initiatives play through every investment we make in every country in our region. Fatih is talking about Turkey having energy efficiency issues or energy intensity issues. Let me assure you, our entire region is the worst region in the world for energy intensity when you look at the former Soviet Union, etc. So we know that we have to deliver on every investment. We are looking at every single investment we make, about 400 a year, doing energy audits, trying to find ways that as we make the investment, we extract value on the energy efficiency side throughout. So we're proud of that. We look forward. We know that these are ambitious targets for sustainable energy in Turkey, very ambitious on the wind side and the solar side, but we are working as hard as we can through direct, through intermediate credit, through policy, through energy efficiency to help achieve that. We look forward to continuing to be the leading financier of sustainable energy in Turkey.
Ambassador, your closing comment.
Yes, thank you. Well, with regards to energy, the government is already applying some of the plans. We have certain targets, both for solar, wind, geothermal, as well as hydro. And in 2030, we are expecting to have around 30% renewable. Actually, we have that even today. But in 2030, of course, we will have a much bigger overall energy amount. The amount that we'll be talking about will be much more. So there will be quite an increase in that area. And not only in Turkey, but globally, Turkey is trying to be active with regard to renewable energy and as well as energy excess issues. Within G20, we are part of the action plan for energy excess. Again, the G20 Renewable Toolkit project. And of course, we are closely cooperating with the IEA, with Fatih here. And we have become, in 2015, we've been connected to the European Continental Electric System as well, which is quite important in terms of energy security, which overall comes to being able to have more renewable energy when you have the base strong. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have, before thanking this incredible panel, I do have one important announcement to make, and that is the next session begins at 10:45 and will take place in this room. And it will feature President Erdogan, as well as Steve Hadley and Energy Minister Albayrak. And so if you're planning to attend the session, please be seated by 10:30 because there will be significant additional security as a result of President Erdogan's attendance. And then the obvious announcements that you hear every time about remember to wear your credentials, and you can get the latest agenda on our app, AC Summit, which you can get from any app store. So I do want to thank all of the members of the panel, so if you will all join me in thanking them, I think they did a great job. So thanks very much.
And thank you, Dick.